Let's get started. So, big letters. This is me. Hi, I'm Joran. I work for Jumbo at the Jumbo Tech Campus, and I'm going to tell you a story I think is really exciting. I have a lot to tell, and I only have 15 minutes, so bear with me, and I hope that I can make it. So we're going to talk about how we manage our component library, and we do this at a very large scale because we're a large corporation. And I'm going to tell you about how we use it in our case, and that might not be the best case for you because you have a different organization. So take bits and pieces of this as inspiration to take home and chew on a bit. Let's get started. So who knows what Jumbo is? That's good, good. Who does shopping at Albert Heijn? That's not so good, but we'll get there. So Jumbo, for those of you who don't know, is a grocery chain in the Netherlands. We also have a couple of stores in Belgium. And we also do e-commerce, and we do a couple of digital products. We have an e-commerce website, some other projects, internal tooling, some apps. So we have a lot of stuff going on. And in order to do all of that, we have founded the Jumbo Tech Campus, which is it is a big department. Over 300 developers working on our digital products, so fairly big. And of that department, I think over 200 or nearly 200, probably, I'm seeing nods, are working on digital. And digital is mostly web and app. So that's what we will be focusing on. And what we do at Jumbo is we put the customer first. And if you do that, one of the things that you can do then is if you could put the customer first, and from the customer's perspective, there's only Jumbo, right? And Jumbo is maybe made up of a website or an app or a store representative, but there are all these entities, and we want to make the transition between these entities as seamless as possible. And that is what we mean with an omni-channel experience. So it doesn't matter which entity you interact with, it should all be similar. And in order to do that, you can use tooling or systems like a design system, which helps you with getting a consistent UI, getting a consistent tone of voice, all that sort of stuff that helps. Now, we named ours Compass. It's Dutch, it's a compass, so it's easy to translate. It's an accessible name. So our component library. We built this thing with our developers, and we built it from scratch. And we used Vue.js, and we used Storybook as our documentation, not Storyblock. Any Histoire fans in the audience? No? Then I'll continue going. So we built the thing from scratch, and that is an investment from a company. Even we have a lot of developers, but still, it is quite an investment. So why did we do this? We think we have a couple of very good reasons of doing this, and I'm going to list them because I'm here anyway. So we have highly specific wishes for our components. We know what our customers want and how to fulfill that needs. We also think that the component library should match our brand and not the other way around. So rather than grabbing an off-the-shelf solution, which has a lot of stuff built in and saves us a lot of time, we want to have more control. So the component library, we built this thing. And also a component library helps you with doing accessibility at a central place, so nice to have. Now you could do a couple of approaches if you start building a component library, and you could consider a dedicated team. So imagine a project lead on that team, a couple of designers, a couple of developers, and they're cranking out components. Now that could work, but we think if we do this, then the rest of the teams, they are waiting on other components to be delivered by another team. So you're not in control of your own situation. That's something that we don't like. So we did something else. Hopefully, yeah, okay. So we made it a distributed approach. And what that means for us, so you have to know at Jumbo we work in Scrum. A lot of Scrum teams working together, and they usually work on a specific domain. Now, that domain doesn't necessarily have to be the component library because it's not really customer related. And we would like to have customer value in our stories or in our sprints. But what we did with the distributed approach, which is also kind of similar of doing open source a bit, is we said every developer that uses Compass in as their component library, which is basically all of the teams doing web, they all have the freedom and the liberty and also the responsibility to maintain Compass. So everybody is allowed to make changes in a component library. That's scary, but also really helpful. because you have a lot of people doing stuff. So we have these reasons. I think these are the main benefits. I'm going to walk you through those. And this is, I think, the most important one. So we have all these developers, I think over actively 25 front-end developers working on a single component library. So that's a lot of people already. And what this does is it creates a sense of, well, investment, but also like a sense of responsibility. You are a partial owner of the component library you're using, so you also feel responsible of keeping it up to date and keeping the quality high. And I think that is really important for the longevity and the sustainability of Compass. So I think this is the most important one. I think I will circle back to the investment at later stages as well. This is important for POs or HR. So if, for instance, you have 4 developers working on a component library and 1 developer leaves, then that means that 25% of the capacity is just gone and you have to replace it. We have over 25 developers working on the same code base. So if one guy leaves, and they're free to leave, we only drop 4%. So that's a big difference. That's also good for, again, POs, HR, but also for us, because we all know a bit about Compass. We all know we have some specialized people who know a lot about specific topics, but there are quite a few. So if somebody leaves, Compass is still going to be maintained in a decent state. This is something that I really like. So we do features in our stories, basically. And what we said is if we want to make this a success, we use Compass to speed up our progress. But if you need to make a modification in the thing that you use from Compass, you're free to do so. Say you need an icon on a button, which is a horrible example because there are already icons on buttons. But say that for the sake of argument, you need to make a change. Then you do that in the same story that you're going to deliver at the end of the sprint. And you can only do that if you have enough speed. And in this case, you have an entire team of front-enders working to validate your pull request, to help you out with your work. So we are able to do this. We are able to make modifications in Compass on one hand, push something to production all in one sprint. Sometimes, I think we have more than 3 deployments of Compass each day. And that brings me to the next bit. So everything that you add to Compass as a developer is immediately shared by everybody else. And because we have that big speed, well, you just get a lot of value over time during your sprints. And that's really cool. So a lot of deployments during the day. And I think that's really cool. So you don't have to wait for, well, we work in Vue. So a Vuefied publisher who publishes a new version. We do that ourselves. And we do it with incredible speed, I think. In order to do that, you need to have a couple of rules, because otherwise stuff will get messy. So we sat together when we started to think about this idea, and we said if we want people to play this game, we need to come up with a decent set of rules so that everybody is playing the same game, essentially, and also knows where we're headed. Now, these rules, they are pretty simple. Basically, it is communicating. So we have this front-end chapter where people talk together. If you want to make a change in Compass, be sure to communicate it. If it's a small change that only affects you, feel free to go ahead and just inform us afterwards, because we know what will break, because we have a lot of... we'll get to that later, I think. Okay. And keep it simple. So whatever you add... I skipped one, right? The reusability. So if you... that is... because we are working in features, and if you add a feature, that includes something that is specific to your app or website that you're maintaining as a team. Compass is going to be less valuable if you only add stuff that matters to your project personally. So what we said is if you do add stuff to Compass, make sure that you consider the stuff that's more reusable, more generic, put that in a different spot, and then put the software that you use for your project specifically, put that somewhere else, so maybe in your personal project, or there's also another slide coming up where I can circle back to this, and keep it simple. Now, in order to facilitate all of this and to help us with this, of course, we have a lot of rules and automation in place to make sure that the quality that we want to have, that it stays in place and stays at the same level. So we have all of these code tests, and they help us out. And they serve 2 purposes, well, more, but I think 2 are important. And one is that it takes away a lot of the headspace that you have if you want to validate a pull request from somebody who is in a completely different team. So you don't have to worry about all of the stuff that doesn't matter. You can only focus on the stuff that matters to you. And the other thing that it does, and that's more of a cultural thing, I think it takes away a lot of the opinions involved in doing a pull request. So maybe somebody has a bad day and they don't really feel they have a different opinion on your approach. If you have a lot of checks and style guides and linting in place already, then it takes away a lot of the complexity or decision making away from those pull requests. And I think that also really helps us in preventing discussions that are basically unneeded. Because if we know an approach and we know how to do things, we discuss it in our chapter, and we create a rule out of it to automate everything. So, big success for us. Now this, I think, is, we're using this right now for all of our pages, and this really works well. But there are, of course, always other stuff or other issues that don't work well in this model. Like, for instance, the maintenance that doesn't really fit in a feature, the utilities or the tooling that you use. So how do we do that? And again, this is where I circle back to the investment slide. We recently worked on going from View 2 to View 3. And that is something that is really big. And it doesn't really fit in a short sprint, right? This is a big topic. This is a lot of work. Fortunately, we have a lot of developers. And what happens? We at Jumbo, we have 30% of our time we can dedicate to stuff that makes Jumbo better in the long run, but doesn't necessarily is within your team's work. So we have some extra time. And what we saw, and this is where I use the investment again. So people are feeling responsible for this, right? So during a chapter meeting, we said, so we need to do this thing at some point in time. We need to upgrade, and it's a big, big fish. What are we going to do? And there was a guy from a team who said, I'm really interested in this, and I want to start investigating this in the time that I have. And then the good part was that there was another guy, like over here, in a completely different team, who raised his hand and said, I want to contribute as well. So what happened, what we saw happening actually was that I think 4 or 5 developers from completely different teams, but they had a similar interest in the component library, and they were investigating in how to do this. So they sat together and they came up with the plan of approach. They did a lot of legwork of putting packages next to each other so we can already move to View 3. We can slowly migrate all of the old components via the Options API to the Composition API. And what they also did is they gave back that knowledge, and they shared it again with the chapter, and they made sure that every time that you pick up a component in your story, do this small bit of work so that it is already prepared for the migration to View 3, because it has to happen eventually at some point. And I think we almost have all of the components migrated now. Now it's a matter of also upgrading everybody's individual apps, but that's not part of what Compass is doing for us. So I think this is proof of the success of the model that we employ here. So time for celebrations. Now there is what we're now doing, and I think this is really cool, and we can only do this with the ownership that we have of our component library. We're going to add smart components that contain business logic. We're going to add them to the component library. And that's a horrible idea if you don't do it properly, because you're going to completely contaminate your component library. But we think that we have a good solution for this, and that we also have a good reason of doing this, of running this risk. So in order to make this happen, we need to have all of the things in place that we think we already have down to pat, like the rules, the automation, we have everything in place for this. And the reason why we're doing this is because we want to have our content editors be in control of the stuff that they need to do, and they want to build pages using our components. We want to completely expose the component library as a toolbox to our content editors, fully integrated with our CMS, and have them put together pages based on stuff that's in there. In order to succeed in that, we need to add some business logic. And I think we are currently in the process. The homepage is now being served via this way, and it seems to work. So we're really happy that we can do this, because this means less developers doing pages, because who likes to do pages, right? We like to build stuff that is fun and that matters. That's it. So on that note, Thank you so much. If you're interested in the slides, if you scan this, you will get redirected to a page where you can download them. And there's also, I've written a summary that is wildly inaccurate if you went to this talk, but it sort of makes sense in a way. It's almost lunchtime, I think, so who's hungry?